Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. How do you decide to spend your marketing budget? Do you tend to repeat your last year's plan, or you do experiments? Then how can you be sure which part of marketing strategy have the highest return on sales? How much should I invest in which channels which are performing for me? Which media gives me the highest ROI? What is the most cost effective campaign? If you don't know what's working and what's not, it's hard to plan for the future, right? So if you have asked these questions to yourself and wondering what are the answers to them, then you're listening to the right episode of this podcast, because our today's guest will help you answer all of them for us, right? So Bharath Gaddam is the founder of Data Poem, which helps companies make use of deep learning technology to improve marketing investment planning. So, hey Bharat, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, hi Sunil. Good to be on the show and brilliant context setting.
Yeah, I mean, like when we spoke before about this, right? I was just so this is all new to me, right? Maybe I'm not in the right position or something like that, but I'm very sure that my VP would have been like planning all of this stuff, which is sort of a house blinder to me because I've never involved in this or I'm not worried about this. But then since we spoke, I started a little bit of research on this particular topic, and I saw that this is a huge challenge, or this is a constant problem for all the marketing leaders, like VP, CMOs, or head of marketings out there.
Yeah,
So
to just give you a context, even today, 76% of the marketing decisions, right, or marketing teams feel that the number one challenge for them is to understand the ROI and how to measure it, even
e-
today as we are talking.
exactly, totally. So like Bharat, let's start with understanding more about you, right? What's your journey been like, and and then we can talk about the latest company or latest platform Data Poem that you're building.
Okay. So I, like lot of us in 19 who are born in 1980s, my graduation was in engineering. Even though I was not very excited about it, I
Mhm.
had to do it. Then I started discovering what really gives me joy and motivation to work towards. I figured out that brands and politics are two areas which I like the most, right? And out of those two
Okay.
areas, I mean, the commonality between the two things is that I wanted to actually have a larger impact on society in a positive way,
Got it.
and to be able to help not just help in terms of people on a one-on-one is a financial level, but more at a larger level of positive
Mm-hmm.
impact.
I thought the
So as a career, of
commonality
course,
I thought the commonality in both that you would say would be huge ad spends.
ad spends and of course communication, right? Both
Yeah.
the fields thrive on only communication. There is nothing else,
Mm-hmm.
right? How you
Okay.
build perception about yourself or a company is what matters the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of course, as a career option, politics was not an option. While us at least you can go towards campaign planning and campaign management, that happens as a huge career opportunity. India don't have that, so I chose brand planning and brand marketing, specialized in
Mm-hmm.
communication management in a school called International School of Business and Media, Pune. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there I joined a company which is one of the largest media planning company in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity to work on the launch of entire ITC personal care,
Oh,
which means
nice.
all the soaps, the shampoos, everything the ITC launched at that time. It was like a secret project where, a couple of guys are privy to all this. And we single-handedly helped the ITC devise a strategy to launch it. And, the good thing is, out of the three categories we've planned for, two of them are successful, which is a great success rate in FMCG category. And
Mm-hmm.
that gave me a lot of exposure to the world of media planning and media strategy. Even then, one of the things that we were figuring out was, you know, how much investment to be done to achieve sales, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's still a hypothetical question. The CMO and the CEO are making wisdom-based calls and judgment-based calls. And we were told that, that's how it works because there are no real tools. which helps us to get there. Or if there are tools, they are not believing those tools, right?
Right.
Both ways. And then I moved to my core passion, brand strategy. Worked for 3.5 years in a company called Center of Gravity Consulting, one of the cutting edge consulting companies which helps brands across the board, like Asian Paints, Tanishq, ICICI, Ford Foundation, both combination of social as well as consumer brands.
Mm-hmm.
And really traveled breadth and width of India to actually understand what consumers think of different things about home, about food, about education,
Nice.
great learning experience. And then did a small entrepreneurial journey along with my wife. I think we started a little ahead of time, where digital was not going as strong as now. We
Mm-hmm.
started a authentic foods brand where we give them the authentic snacks and pickles and powders and sweets, namkeens, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think, ahead of time. While it was gratifying in terms of understanding how the consequences of decision making, right? That is when I realized that it is about decision making that actually makes anything successful or failure, right?
Right.
Business, life. And that's a great learning to have, because that's what matters, right? I mean, every
Mm-hmm.
time you cannot think about that didn't work, that didn't work. Eventually you make decisions during that time, and you'll realize what is that actually makes or separates you from success and failure, right?
Yeah.
That happened. And then I moved into Mudra, where I was taken in as a strategic planning head for Mudra, for both South brands as well as some of the national brands. And one thing that I felt was that again the same problem continued, right? The bug in me continuously had that while we were giving strategies worth thousands of crores of media to be spent by the brands,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the back of the mind, you all know it is not fully right. There's, when we don't know some things, and honestly no one had the tools or data to figure out, or techniques to figure out how to get the right way. But that it's back of the mind all the time that there's something that we are missing, and we're just doing a very efficiency based planning and not effectiveness based planning.
Makes
uh,
sense.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
there comes the next wave of media planning, which is digital. And I said, at least in digital we can actually figure out what is working, what is not working. But again, the story repeated itself in a different way now, because now consumer is interconnected, and there is an impact of TV on digital which you don't know, digital on TV which you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you're planning in silos again, right? And even within digital, for example, I mean, a lot of marketeers who are predominantly in digital marketing space will tell you that there is a technique called multi-touch attribution, or tools of multi-touch attribution, which will help you get that answer. But honestly,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many inherent limitations of the technique, right? And there's a lot of human bias in assigning weights to those techniques. Again, it goes back to the thing of it's not comprehensive, it's not solving the thing that we are trying to solve. And in a case of a consumer brand where there is a multiple media platforms being used for developing brand awareness or brand preference, you are not doing justice to the both media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because TV is generating some impact on digital, you are not calculating that. And if you assume that the digital is created that, you're again going in a wrong way in terms of allocation and the planning. So during this time, when the digital is moving up and TVs also, there's an interconnected behavior that is happening. Me and my boss, me and my co-founder right now, sorry, who are actually trying to solve this problem for marketeers, and we realize that it is whatever we want to say, we are not able to back it up with data. And the brands also, they don't have the tools and the system to understand what is working and not working. And it almost becomes like one of the Nielsen study just revealed, majority of the decisions of media even today in 2020 are taken based on perceptions, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
reality of life. And 2.5 years back we said enough is enough. And we said we will try to solve this one thing, and where the marketers don't have unanswered questions during their decision making in marketing investment planning. That's how we set out to start Data Poem, which is a platform that we created now 2.5 years back. And it's been a journey actually trying to figure out that this problem is faced by people across the world. Every marketing decision maker who makes decision on media investments goes through this, and to be able to solve that, or at least to be able to help them or enable them solve this and make them superheroes, is a very gratifying feeling.
Nice. That's really interesting. And then talking about marketing mix modeling, right? So why is it still a great way to measure things, or is it a great way to start planning, or there is something else which is used by a lot of marketing leaders
Okay.
nowadays?
So let me answer this question, the last question first, right? I'll tell you that as per one of the studies, more than 80% of the media planning is still done on Excel sheets, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the truth. So which means that only 20% of the people are using some kind of tools, right? What
Mm-hmm.
are the tools available? Yes, you rightly pointed out. Market mix modeling is a tool that is developed in 1970s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is fundamentally a univariable linear regression statistical model developed in basically from an econometric modeling applied to marketing, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
developed in 1970s. And what happened is that as the complexity of the media increased, right, model started to fail. What I mean by that is that at a fundamental level, what the model assumes is that every medium is independent, or every input variable is independent, which
Mm-hmm.
is where the fundamental flaw starts with, right? And the
Right.
second problem with that is that, like I said, it's a univariate analysis, which means that it assumes that only one variable is impacting the sale, right? Which means, I mean, in this case, a lot of times people use spends as a parameter to understand the impact of spends on sales in different platforms, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the
Mm-hmm.
case, right? In imagine in marketing scenario or in advertising scenario, you do the advertising message itself has an effect, the duration of the ad has an effect, the channel in which you see it has an effect, of course in terms of where the investment that is done to cause that also has an effect, right? So the traditional models won't take all these variables, right?
Got
And
it.
that's
Mm-hmm.
again the second problem that actually made it break. And the third thing is in terms of the granularity of the things, right? What I mean by granularity is that most of these models can actually take data at a very aggregate level. When I say aggregate level, imagine all India level is one model where you're taking data in terms of spends done by different platforms at an all India level, and maybe monthly, and most,
Mm-hmm.
if it all it is most rigorous, it's weekly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens in that situation is that the impact of different elements are actually different in different markets, right? Imagine a South Indian advertising completely differs from North Indian advertising, right, in terms
Yeah.
of response and the way
Makes
they
sense.
consume media, the way they buy products. Like for example, South Indian is a very brand led purchase vis-a-vis a North the market, which is a combination of brand as well as non-branded products, right? But you are assuming that everything is uniform, and you're taking it in the form of investments, and which actually makes the whole thing not comprehensive and holistic, right? In the absence of any other technique, maybe yes, but it is a broken system. And last but not the least is in terms of the way it actually gives outcome, right? It is, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
at a very aggregate level. You don't understand the impact of different elements, and
Mm-hmm.
that actually breaks down the whole thing for the marketeer. And the time it takes to build models, right?
Right.
Traditionally people, and it's a human based thing, right? So humans had to create these statistical models using tools, and it used to take minimum of 3 months to 6 months. And statistical models are by nature inference models, they're not
Mm-hmm.
prediction models,
Yeah.
right? But what the marketeer wants is forecast, right? It is not about post-mortem. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
important to learn, but that doesn't matter, right? How do I
Yeah.
use this to actually make my decisions and create a forecasting model is a problem. So time consumption and inference is the last one, which break the whole thing. So what happens is that by the time model is to come, it is 3 to 6 months, and by then the market would have changed, and all the inferences would have been of no use for the market to make decisions. So most of the people who have even tried market mix modeling have started to realize that it is not going to work, and that
Got it.
got aggravated moment digital behavior became so rampant, right?
Yeah.
And because it assumes that it is a independent variable, the entire model just fails, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the fundamental problem. So it's not that the CMOs don't understand this, right? The CMOs
Uh-huh.
understand this. They've been asking the ecosystem to give them a unified solution which can answer all their what ifs, right?
Right. Makes
And
sense.
time and again, CMO is given half-baked solution or a siloed solution, which is forced upon him to use as a solution to what he wants to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
will never solve it, right? And it is always told that the CMOs are not using the right tools and techniques vis-a-vis. Actually, the problem is with the ecosystem, right? Which are
Mm-hmm.
not giving them the right solutions, and that's where
Got
the
it.
frustration is of most marketeers. And now the biggest pain point of every marketeer is not only just understanding what works and what doesn't work, but understanding in a dynamic way, right?
Right.
Understanding in an
Mm-hmm.
agile manner. And that's where market mix modeling anyways failed at multiple levels. With agile planning, it just completely crashed, right?
Right.
And the other technique that is available is called multi-touch attribution, which is a digital only technique. Even now that is going into the phase of redundancy, because Google announced that they are going to block the third party cookie tracking, which is where all these multi-touch attribution tools are based, right?
Yeah.
So that's again breakdown. So what is happening is that while the marketeers want a right solution for them to get making decision making, the ecosystem is failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where when we started our journey, we said we will not be a player who will not solve the questions that needs to be answered. If we don't solve it, then we'll not start the platform, right?
Got it. Makes
And
sense.
that's where I believe is beginning of the end of the old paradigm, the way I see it, which is siloed old world planning technique and measurement techniques. I think it is going to end, because parallelly what is happening is that the giant strides that happened in AI, particularly in machine learning and deep learning,
Mm-hmm.
have revolutionized how these multivariate non-linear time series problems have to be solved for, right, for
Mm-hmm.
prediction. And we've learned a lot of these techniques, a lot of we studied a lot of techniques that are happening in machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
And when we've and this is and it was a gradual thing that is built up, right, while we were trying multiple techniques to figure out how to solve this. As we developed our system, deep learning in a way also started gaining relevance and solving big problems like Google Translate, Netflix, Amazon's e-commerce predictions, as well as Uber for predicting the driver demand. So deep learning has started to evolve and build prediction models and prediction solutions across multiple things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when we realize that if we need to solve the four fundamental problems of marketeers right now, which is unified, which is comprehensive in nature, which needs to be agile, which needs to be granular in nature, and which needs to be having a forecasting and optimization in place, deep learning ticked all the boxes. And that's when we actually said, what if we applied deep learning to marketing problems? And we got our answer. And I think that's where the new paradigm of planning and measurement is going to happen. And I'm very confident that that's where the future is going to be.
That's really great. That was a long one, but definitely an insightful one, Bharat. Yeah, so multiple things, right? I have, but let's one thing that you correctly pointed out, like as you know, postmortem is important. Like it's very important that you figure out or you answer the questions where you know which channels worked for you in the past or what was the
Yeah.
what was the ROI, that is really important. But what's more important is planning about the future, right? Because it's uncertain and you never know what's coming up or what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Because at the
exactly.
start of this year, many people would have planned out
Yes.
multiple campaigns and different things that they will do, different experiments, different channels that they would spend on. But everything went for a toss, and they had to maybe restructure at the start of, let's say, Q2, right? Jan, Feb,
Yes.
March was still fine, but then
Yes.
Q2 was something where this paradigm
Correct.
shift happened that happened for every company in the world, right? If you're a
Yes.
SaaS, non-SaaS, consumer, D2C, any company, right?
Correct.
Um, so how does this help, as you rightly mentioned, like so these planning or these technologies would definitely help any company or any CMO, any VP marketing with with planning of how to spend, on what channels to spend, how much to spend, and what kind of results you can expect in some sort of
Yes.
way based on what data you have collected in the past, for sure, right? So talking about data, right? So what are some of the metrics, which are good to track, right? Like when we are spending, not many SaaS companies would spend offline, right? Like they would spend only on
Yes.
digital.
Digital. Yes.
So yeah. So then what are the top metrics that the CMOs are always worried about, right? What are, according to your experience?
Yeah, so I think particularly the SaaS CMOs, I think are questioned on two levels. One is what is the ROI that the marketing has generated, and second is to be able to measure it and show it to the board so that you get more budgets for the planning. The second thing is in terms of how much, how to invest that money so that it is a optimal ROI decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the metrics that I believe marketing team has to deal with, there are obvious one a lot of marketers do, which is forecasted MRR, which is monthly recurring revenue in terms of new business, or in terms of MQLs. There are some companies which do MQLs, FMRRs, or sales qualified, which is sales qualified leads. While those are the metrics that needs to be taken into consideration, I believe the important thing is to understand how marketing is, what kind of marketing is delivering the final sale, right?
Right.
Unless you understand what kind of marketing is getting what kind of customers for closures, you will keep giving MQLs, and eventually sales team will always complain saying that this is rubbish, right? So that
Right.
perennial problem of marketing versus sales always happen.
Mm-hmm.
And one definite metric I would look for is conversion rates, which is lead to conversion rates, closure times that are happening
Mm-hmm.
in terms of conversions, as well as velocity of deals moving from MQL to proposals to closures, right?
Makes
Uh,
sense. Yeah.
those are metrics. And I also want, I mean, and that's, I think, is a fundamental thing. Lot of times, particularly B2B SaaS marketers miss out, is in terms of how is the brand perceived, right? Or how is the
Right.
brand's affinity to in a particular category.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, the most important metric is what is the share of brand searches in a particular category that you're operating in. If you're
Got
a
it.
very unique brand that you are creating a new category, even
Mm-hmm.
then, what are the branded searches that you are getting, and how is it moving on a month-on-month basis or a quarter-on-quarter basis is a very critical thing to observe,
Mm-hmm.
because eventually, if branded searches increase, your overall CPA is going to get down, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a business ROI, and that is in the realms of marketing.
Makes
Lot of
sense.
times marketing teams only look at demand generation but let go of the brand building part, and that's a completely lopsided way. So I feel that along with the demand generation metrics, you should definitely have brand preference indicators, like I said, brand search share, or in terms of web traffic or conversion rates, etc., etc., organic search, organic
Mm-hmm.
traffic. Those are the elements that you definitely need to track as a
Great.
marketing performance.
Yeah, and so these technologies can also be used for, predicting what kind of activities that a company can do to increase the brand presence as well. As this applies to just marketing and demand gen side of things, do these technologies apply to the brand building side of things as well?
Yes. So what happens
Oh,
is
nice.
that
Mm-hmm.
because fundamentally, right? I mean, I'll tell you a case study, right? One of the clients that we're operating on uses, like all B2B SaaS companies, apply a lot of demand generation techniques like, Google, Facebook, programmatic, LinkedIn, etc., as well as channel partners, right? Content
Mm-hmm.
partners, affiliates to actually get leads. That's
Mm-hmm.
one way, right? And you will not believe, on a first glance, on a last click attribution, 70% of the leads are coming through organic, right?
Oh, got it.
Then there is a worry that, what's happening to the demand gen. So of course, all organic is happening because a lot of thing is impacted by the demand gen activities. That is one level,
Got it.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing to understand is that 20% of the new business growth is coming from organic traffic, right? Which is not impacted by anything. It is just the brand's preference of the consumers in their minds and getting closed, right? It is
Got it.
important to understand how that baseline effect, so we call it as baseline effect, which is,
Mm-hmm.
imagine if there was no marketing activity, how
Mm-hmm.
much is the brand on its own pulling the new business growth, right?
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And it is very important for us to understand what elements will help it grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes display campaigns will grow, sometimes a content initiative will grow, but understanding that and actually helping it grow will eventually increase your overall business ROI. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be in the closure, like I said, closure conversion rates. It can be in terms of MQLs coming in, converting into sales leads, deal closure times, deal volumes that we are looking at in terms of size of the ticket size. you know Everything improves, right?
Mm-hmm. Makes
So
sense.
that's what we can definitely use the tools to understand what is helping brand metrics to grow.
Great. So my last one before we move on to the lightning round, right? So how can a startup get started with planning, or making use of these technologies to actually start planning and figuring out, doing the postmortem as well, yes, and plus doing the forecasting of where to spend, how much to spend, what channel to spend, and what kind of ROI to expect. So how can someone start? Maybe if you can give us like a 3-step or a 5-step process, like hey, do this first, do this second, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the most complicated question because one, any
Eh,
startup who is starting off their journey will don't have any learnings
like, right, maybe not
with
maybe not starting, but let's say
yeah,
there's a
any
company
growing
who
startup,
is,
yeah,
yeah.
growing company for sure, right? Fundamentally what we need to believe is that when you're starting up, you need to figure out that there is one thing is called brand intent build up, and second
Mm-hmm.
is intent capture, right? Both are critical, and you need to be able to make decisions on investments on both. That's the first thing that you need to definitely have in mind, saying that how do I ensure that my organic traffic is increasing, and
Yeah.
then how do I ensure that I am getting enough conversations with new customers who don't know me, right? Both are critical, right? That's the first step. And the second step is to figure out how is different elements of marketing
Mm-hmm.
helping in achieving the organic increase as well as achieving your MQLs or SQLs or closures of sales, right?
Got it.
You should always believe that we need to have a tool which should solve this and not only depend on either a last click attribution or a first click or a U shape or a W shape, because they're all human biases that will get into the picture. You need to have a
Got it.
system which
Mm-hmm.
is unbiased learning that it has to do to arrive at what is the contribution of each channel, right? That
Makes
is
sense. Yeah.
a big important thing that we need to keep in mind. Once we have the first step is to understand we need to invest both in increasing organic traffic as well as new conversations. Second is to ensure that we have a mechanism or a tool to ensure we are learning interconnected effect between different platforms and arriving at the final ROI. And the
Mm-hmm.
last thing is to have a disciplined process where we use the agile learning tools to actually guide us on what is working and what is not working and make those changes in a dynamic manner, right? If we
Right.
do these three steps, I think, the marketing investment ROI will definitely be on one of the highest levels.
That's really interesting. I think it would be great, if people listening to this would just start with this. Again, this would be definitely sure for companies who are, let's say, around 10 million ARR, right? So they would have a lot of data coming in from different channels
Yes,
that they could study on, and using that data to make predictions or make forecast some ROI,
correct.
and also use that in a like planning as well. I wouldn't say that it's for people who are still, like, in the 1 to 10 phase, 1 to 10 ARR phase, because again they're not spending much, and they're still on the experiment side, that figuring out new channels. They're still building. The channels are still very immature for them,
Yes.
and yeah, so it
and
is
and
probably for
basically the
someone.
complexity of decision making is lesser. The
Uh-huh.
complexity of interconnected effect is lesser because they might be
Yeah,
using few channels, so it's easy to understand what is working, what is not working from a human observation level.
it's
As the
mostly the
number of
intuition.
channels,
Yeah,
yes, number of channels increase and the number of within channels, number of creatives or messaging changes, the complexity changes, and hence there you
yeah.
require a tool to actually help you solve that.
And also, like, you have a huge budget at 10, when you are at 10 to 100 or
Yes,
10 to 50, you have a huge budget, so you need to spend it carefully.
exactly.
Right? So yeah, this has been great. So let's move on to, the lightning round. I have three questions. So yeah, Bharat. So first one, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
I think, the most important thing is about not jargon, is about helping people understand in a language that they will understand, right? It
Makes
is
sense.
not about throwing jargons.
Right. Great.
Simplicity of telling the answer is the most important, which when you know the stuff well, you'll be able to present it in a simple manner and most effective manner.
Makes sense, totally. I think you did that just a few minutes back when we were talking about all these different technologies and how planning would actually help founders. I think it you explained it very simply, and I think people would love that.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. And yeah, so second one, like, what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
It actually failure actually helped me to understand that, like I told you, right, decision making is one of the most important thing that makes you success of failure, right?
Got it.
And you need to be aware of that, and when you're going through those situations, you need to make right decisions and not necessarily short-sighted decisions.
Makes sense. And then my last one, like, what's the number one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
Okay, I will tell you this, and I have a couple of things, but the first thing it's inherent in what I feel always is
Uh-huh.
I always wanted to replace, almost like, for example, if I'm working as a management trainee, I wanted to replace a VP. If I was
Got it.
working as a VP, I wanted to replace a CEO. If I
Mm-hmm.
am becoming a national head, I wanted to become the global head.
Makes
It
sense.
is not thinking of taking one step further or two steps further. It's about leaps, right?
Got it.
When you want to have those leaps, you inherently will learn, right? The second thing, I think it happened, I don't know how, from schooling itself, somehow I almost learned self, almost, right? Most of the concepts I used to learn on my own.
Mm-hmm.
That helped me, get used to the self learning practice that is prevalent right now. So the combination of taking leaps in terms of your growth targets, so that you inherently will learn much more
Uh-huh.
faster, and learning it on self, and not waiting for someone to tell you or give you training. I don't think if someone is expecting training in nowadays, they're going to become redundant sooner.
Nice. That's really interesting, Bharat. So yeah, it's been great speaking with you. This all was very insightful, and I'm sure people listening to this would love this as well, would love it as well, and it would be insightful for them
I
as well.
really wish and hope that it is,
Yeah.
it helps a few people who are going through these conversations. And I love the spirit of your podcast, where you are trying to answer the questions of the practitioners, either you're facing or people around you are facing. And if they can actually get answers, or I'm more than happy to answer more questions if they come in the podcast. we can send email answers to the people who have more questions about the same, or we
For
can do
sure.
one more session if required.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
for
great.
sure. We
Thank you
can.
so much
Yeah,
for having me. It's really a
yeah,
pleasure, and
great.
a lot of good things.